this. The blame is not the entire Indonesian national team. Shin Tae-yong should not be faulted. He can plan all the best tactics in the world against Hajime Moriyasu's side, but it's up to the 11 players on the pitch to deliver what he has planned for. And unfortunately, not all of them delivered as promised. Indonesia 0, Japan 4. The score alone is a massive national tragedy for Indonesian football. And the worst defeat, even if it's not by scoreline, the worst defeat of any kind Shin Tae-yong has endured since he became the Garuda's head coach from 2020. How did everything fall apart when it was supposed to be the most serious test for the new look Indonesian team with so many naturalized players? How did everything all go so wrong for the Garuda tonight at the Gelora Bung Karno? It's so catastrophic, especially once they conceded the first 2 goals. Everything began to nosedive. This is not a national team of local-born Indonesians that did their best but could not match the higher abilities of the Japanese players who play in the top European leagues. In fact, if the game were played on paper, it ought to have been an even contest between those naturalized players who are playing for the Garudas and against Japan national team who are ranked in the top 20 in the world. But this is not the case. What happened? Before I go into the details of before going to a total breakdown of what went wrong for Indonesia tonight, I must clarify this. The blame is not the entire Indonesian national team. Shin Tae-yong should not be faulted. He can plan all the best tactics in the world against Hajime Moriyasu's side, but it's up to the 11 players on the pitch to deliver what he has planned for. And unfortunately, not all of them delivered as promised. Do not blame the local-born players, the 2 who started the game, Yaakob Sayuri and Rizky Ridho. They both actually performed heroically. In fact, Rizky Ridho was one of the best Indonesian players on the pitch tonight, making very crucial clearances and was not at fault for any of the goals conceded, while Yaakob was an energetic force on the right with his darting runs causing some problems for the Japanese defense, even though his misplaced control of the pass did result in Japan's second goal. But he should not be faulted for his commitment to the cause. Neither can we fault the Pamata Ahan, Marcelino Ferdinand, and Witan Sulaiman who came on later in the game, but they could not change anything because once it was 4 goals, it was game, set and match for the visitors. Then who should be blamed for this malaise? If it's not the coach, if it's not the local-born players, actually some of the naturalized players ought to be blamed for their excellent foreign football education that they had received in the countries of origin and at the high levels that they had played as professional players. At those moments of lapses, really, those damning lapses, especially the 3rd goal and the 4th goal in the second half, those recent naturalized recruits were really responsible for that. When it went wrong, it really did went wrong. Yes, they did recover, they did prevent more goals from being scored, but no, they were the cause of it. When you may have thought probably a local player who does not have that level of skill or technical ability to compete with the Japanese, but he has that heart and commitment. But yet, it's these imports who were recently recruited into the national team after the Asian Cup. They fell short. They really fell short of expectations. The captain of the day, Idzes, the goalkeeper, Maarten Paes, then your midfielders, Tom Hay, Nathan Joaon, and the striker up front, Ragnar Mangun, and of course the debutant Kevin Dix, who decided that after 41 minutes he was done with competing against the Japanese in his first competitive outing for the Garudas. It says a lot. For all their higher technical ability compared to the majority of the locals in the squad, for their exposure playing against some of the better players in the league, and especially for a few of them who played in the top divisions in the world, for them to commit those unforgivable sins, I think, I hate to call it lah. It's like, you have played at this level, and as I think for these so-called top level defenders, when they played this level, they are supposed to have these basics, and yet, how did they get it so horribly wrong? Especially the third goal. The third goal in the second half. Were they not awake after what had happened late in the first half, and also what happened at halftime? Especially Paes and Idzes. I mean, I'll talk about the third goal first. A misplaced pass straight to Japan's best player of the evening, Hidemasa Morita. It was like a free pass straight to him, and he took a shot. He took his chance, considering that none of the defenders really closed him down outside the box. The bad pass from the goalkeeper, unforgivable, terrible. But what happened thereafter? Horror of horrors. Really? I mean, what was the captain doing? How did he allow the ball to just roll under him? Not even contact, just roll under him and allowing it to roll straight into the back of the net, just like that. How was that possible? This was a guy who has played. I mean, this is a guy who is currently playing in Serie A for Venezia, one of the best leagues in Europe. And he allowed this basic mistake to occur in front of the expectant home fans at Bengano, who are already silent. But they got more muted because of that error. Horrifying, really. How did these two, who are supposed to be the main stalwarts in this new look Indonesian national team, slip up so badly at that moment that they allowed the Japan number 5 to just score such an easy goal? It should not have been easy. In fact, if you look at the first half an hour before Japan scored the first goal, I think is especially later on when they scored the second goal. For the first 40 minutes in particular, Indonesia really made life difficult for Japan. They really put men behind the ball. They make vital interceptions and clearances, and they were effective going forward in counter-attacks, particularly in the ninth minute. In the ninth minute, where let me check the lineup first. Particularly in the ninth minute, after Indonesia make a big clearance, when Japan's centre-back Ko Itakura misjudged the bounce of the ball and allowed Indonesia's lone forward Ragnar Oratsmangon to actually go behind him and straightaway go into the one-on-one counter-attack, where Zion Suzuki had to rush out to deny him before he could place his ball in the back of the net. It was from that moment that fired up the Garudas for the rest of the first half, and especially when Jakub Saruri was such a threat on the right. Yes, one of the only two local-born players who were in the starting 11. He made a huge impact on the right, and combining well firstly with Kevin Dix, who was making his debut, and later on with Sandy Walsh, especially when they combined for, let me see. Yes, especially the 40th minute, when after Sayuri actually released Dix on the right, and for Dix to deliver quite a pinpoint pass into the box, but Rafael Struijk was actually just a touch away from actually connecting that pass or make a mistouch at the far end of the box, at the far post. But that was the momentum that Indonesia had, and they make the Samurai Blues work hard for every inch of the grass at the Gelora Bung Karno. The Japanese had to start harassing, they had to step up the tempo in the passing game, they had to give as good as they got. I mean, sometimes when Japan national team, when the senior team actually come to Southeast Asia, and usually when they perceive most of our national teams to be quite weak, they will have a good tempo of play, but they will not be raising the intensity, they will not be upping the game intelligence to show that this is why they are the best Asian national team in the world. But yet, for that period of time, that 40 minutes in the first half, Indonesia make Japan work hard to score the first 2 goals. They press, they push, they harried, they countered effectively, and in the end, Japan had to utilize the smarts that they had gained to unlock what had otherwise been a very stout Indonesian wall to unlock. And it was some fine skill and vision. That fine skill and vision from Morita that led to the opening goal. And then you have the second goal where Kaoru Mimota, until the 40th minute, he had a torrid first half until that moment when he was finally able to find some space on the left. I mean, some space on Indonesia's right. Beforehand, the only thing Mimota could do was get booked for cynical foul. But in that moment, that missed control from Jakob Sayuri was crucial in the ball moving straight to Mimota's half, was able to thread a pass across for Takumi Minamino to score the second goal. That was when Gelora Bung Karno began to get quiet. Well, despite Indonesia, and that was when Japan finally had a small foothold on Indonesian territory, when they knew that they finally had to work hard to overcome. That was the first half. Indonesia, they were not at fault for either of the goals. They work hard, they really toyed, but that little moments, that little mistake that you can't afford to give for a team like Japan, that was what happened for the second goal. That little miscontrol. Once you let slip a little bit, that's when Japan will punish. And you think that for Indonesia's starting 11, with the quality of the players they have, they ought to know better. And unfortunately, after halftime, what came out was, I think for the next 15 to 20 minutes, the horrors of horrors. How did Indonesia just fall apart as though they were playing like, I mean, no offense to the local boys or even to the Indonesians who are playing in the league. I mean, those mistakes they would have expected from the Indonesian professional players. But how did those Dutch-born players make such horrific mistakes? How? The horrors of horrors, as I mentioned, the mistakes all came from the recent recruits, the recently naturalized players for the Garudas. How did they make such horrific errors that could flabbergast the home crowd at Gelora Bung Karno? How could they do such errors that could even flabbergast Shin Tae-yong? I mean, it could have been a creditable 0-2 defeat, but no. I've already mentioned a third goal that was calamitous. But the fourth goal, how did they allow such space? I mean, when you're talking about Japan, the Japanese are very precise in the way they make their passes, in their shots, in their movement. The precision has always been their trademark. And yet, again, Idzes, Paes, and Kelvin Verdong, and possibly Nathan Joalon or Tom Hay, one of the latter two. These four who were trying to close in on Yukinari Sugawara. I mean, he came on as that guy came Japan number 2. He came on as a sub, and he was given so much freedom on the right side to run through. And the best part is, you got 4 who were closing in. But what happened? Why would they not even try to close that gap to prevent him from shooting? Why did they give him that space, that limited space, to allow him to rifle past with such precision? I mean, this is not 4 amateur defenders who are trying to cover, trying to cower, or trying to scramble back against a world-class team. These are your 4 European-based professionals, and they really stumble big time. 2 of them already involved in that horrific third goal. Now 4, what is the real problem? I mean, from then on, it's no longer about how Indonesia put up a fight. In fact, it really exposed a really big issue about the current Indonesian national team setup. Because I think, especially in the latter part of the second round of Asian qualifying and now in the current third round, there are more naturalized players for Shin Tae-yong to utilize, to choose from. But it came at some expense. It came at the expense of a handful of naturalized players who were previously in the service and were used effectively in the Asian Cup this year. Jordi Amat, who was on the bench tonight and later came on as a late substitute. Alkan Bagot, who was dropped from the team in recent selections, recent call-ups. They would have, if they had been starting, it could have been still 4-0. It could have been 3-0 to Japan. But would you think that Jordi Amat or Alkan Bagot would have allowed the ball to just run, to just go past them so slowly? I mean, in a way, maybe from our viewers' angle, it could be slow, but they would have just hacked the ball away. I mean, just to keep the scoreline respectable, just to keep the effort until then respectable, especially the first half when they put up such a fighting, determined display. But that 20 minutes in the second half really smashed everything apart. I mean, then this is where I'm going to compare with the recent recruits and the ones who had been with Shin Tae-yong and the Garudas for some time. It's an ambitious plan by Eric Tauhier to want to raise up the standard of the national team, and it's very understandable that sometimes with the local players you do have limits in terms, I mean, they have the heart, they have that commitment, but sometimes when you play against stronger opponents without the technique, they are always going to be found wanting at any moment. But yet tonight, it was not the local bonds who failed, it's those recent recruits. Those recent recruits had one major problem. I mean, 2 weeks of international duty with the Garudas. You only have 2 weeks to work together, and especially flying many thousands of air miles from Europe and I think for Pace case, the United States to link up with the national team, and having to fly a further few thousand more miles to the Middle East to play, especially the final round of World Cup qualifiers. It's going to be quite tiring, yes, but there are expectations. These expectations for the locals, especially once you have these players for the national team, is you're supposed to lift up the standard. You're supposed to really lift up the standard of the Garuda, to lift up the name of the Garuda to a high level. I mean, to outsiders, they deride them as what? The Netherlands B team or C team, or even maybe the 21st century Dutch East Indies national team that actually did play in the 1938 World Cup. But that's a different story. But when you have these players who are supposed to raise up at a different level, great for Shin Tae-yong. Now he has players who probably at that level that he had used to coach in the South Korean national team and higher, and also probably in his previous coaching career and even in his playing career. Now, yes, great. Now he can work with them and he can organize a quick, coherent tactical plan that would be suited to tailor according to the opponents they face, especially in the final round of qualifying where There's no chance given for any mistakes. And already in the first 3 games, they did very well, holding to 3 successive draws, particularly against Australia, who are regular World Cup qualifiers in Jakarta in the same stadium earlier in this phase. But after the narrow 1-2 defeat in China, things just simply fell apart in the second half. It was worse than what had happened in China. Much worse. Because of the lack of cohesion. I mean, once they go back to the clubs, it's back to being together with their club mates, being back together in that club culture that they have been accustomed to. And playing for Garuda, especially when you travel through several time zones to be with them, it's still foreign territory to them. They have not yet bonded with other naturalized players such as Rafael Sturridge, Sandy Walsh, who came on for Kevin Dix late in the first half, and also, Justin Hubner. All these 3 players plus Jody Ahmad, they were involved in the Asian Cup. They understand what it means to play for the Garudas, what it means to play for the red jersey of Indonesia, what it means to play for the expectant Indonesian fans. But for the rest of the recent recruits, they have not completely grasped it. And yes, in terms of individual ability, they raise up the standard immediately. But once it comes to connecting, especially when the chips are down, cracks are beginning to show, especially in that second half. The cracks show. It's like Shin Tae-yong also saw it quickly that some of them are really not up to it anymore. Yes, it took the South Korean very late to take out 3 of them. But by then, already the damage was done. And at least these guys who came on, whether it's Pamata Ahan for Yaakob Sayuri, Witan Sulaiman, Marcelino Ferdinand, and Jordi Amat, they at least put on a sturdier show than what had happened in that calamitous, that disastrous 20 minutes. It's a thorny issue to settle because when you have foreign players who are of higher technical quality but are not adjusted to the team culture, to international football, probably they had underestimated a little on the Japanese. These guys, they thought it's the same level because some of them may not have played in the same high level as, say, Minamino, who used to play for Liverpool and the same club that Wataru Endo, the captain for the Samurai Blues, is playing for right now. There are a few who might be playing in the local league, but still, the underestimation has proven to be very costly, because once they encountered things that they had not encountered, like making such horrific mistakes in front of an expectant crowd, conceding such silly goals when normally it should have been a piece of cake for them, then, as we know, game over. And now these pieces have been partly shattered. The lack of cohesion has been costly. That shortcut, the frailties, the weaknesses of of this so-called shortcut plan for the Garudas is now being exposed. It's slowly unraveling. And Shin Tae-yong has a very tough job, has a very tough task at hand. How is he going to patch up these fragile pieces back together? Especially once, when you have this calamitous crisis, while somewhat not surprising, especially when you're up against Japan, I mean, the result-wise, the performance-wise leaves a lot to be desired. And Eric talk here, what is he going to think about it? Is he going to, because when you just throw in a recent recruit to also become, Idzes, Idzes, he was a recent recruit. I mean, yes, he was naturalized late last year. He missed the Asian Cup because of the registration deadline. But still, you just throw him the armband just like that. How are the locals going to think? How are those committed earlier naturalized players going to think? The dressing room will be quite far apart because you got these naturalized players en masse one side, your locals and those guys who have been with them with the cause, your Sandy Washers, your Rafael Sturridge, Jordi Amats, Justin Hubners. They all saw what had happened in the Asian Cup, that cohesiveness that was there, even in defeat. But it was totally missing tonight, especially when things go wrong, things really went horribly wrong. And especially at this stage, mistakes can be very dearly. If you're talking about mistakes from local bonds, I know it's bad, but you can't fault them because their heart is there, the commitment is there, and they will not allow these kind of bad mistakes to happen, especially in what they would see as the biggest games of their international careers. But for this lot of recent naturalized recruits, there's plenty to ponder and think about, and it's a very long dark road ahead. While it's doubtful that Indonesia will eventually qualify for the World Cup as what Eric told him, I hope, but before even thinking about qualifying for a World Cup, those 3 draws are creditable enough. It's to find that first win, is to find a few more points to make it a respectable finish in Group C, especially when Japan is running away with the group. They don't want to be seen as cannon fodder. These frailties have to be addressed by both Eric Thohir and Shin Tae-yong, and also the key players involved in these different groups. If they can settle that, at least can see a respectable finish. Otherwise, we could see similar horrific shows like what had happened tonight, that 20 minutes in the second half, that exposed those frailties in the Garudas.